We will get started. So call to order our February 5th, 2024 meeting of the Community Preservation Commission. Do you all have the amended agenda in front of you? It has some red lines on it. Make sure we are literally on the same page. Before we get to the agenda, Chris has a new friend for us to introduce.
Thank you. So I just wanted to introduce the long-awaited assistant planner position. I know we mentioned that it was filled. We're happy to have Kushal Raghuram here today with us tonight. He's not going to stay the whole meeting. I know we have a lot to cover tonight. He's been diligently watching the other meetings, getting up to speed on everything. So been throwing a lot at him, so we'll give him the rest of the night off. But definitely just wanted to bring him in, introduce him to the committee. Always important to put a face to a name. So we're excited to have him on board. He's been doing a stellar job for this first week that he's been. This is week number 2 that he started. So we're gonna keep throwing stuff at him and keep working hard. So we're excited to see where he goes with
Well,
everything.
welcome. Thank you for coming back for week 2.
Thank you so much.
It might be helpful maybe if we just all go around so you have actual faces to put with our names. Susan, Kathy, do you want to start?
I'll start. I'm Kathy McSweeney. I am the representative from the Shrewsbury Housing Authority.
And I'm Gail Aslanian, representative from the Historical Commission.
I'm John Segelnick, and I'm a member at large.
Martha Gatch, representative from the Conservation Commission.
And I'm Deborah Mooney. I'm an at-large member and the chair.
I'm Melanie McGee, also at large.
Carl Nelson, representatives from Cemetery and Parks.
All right, nice to meet you.
And making the grand
And-
entrance, our vice chair, Jason Molina, also an at-large member. We're glad to have you with us, and we look forward to working with you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So, all you have missed is a call to order and the introduction of the new assistant town planner.
Welcome.
So first on our agenda is to review and approve our minutes from our January meeting. Has everyone had an opportunity to take a look at them? Are there any questions, revisions, comments? Thank you, Melanie. As usual, very detailed minutes. I appreciate that. As my memory gets more clouded, I appreciate it more and more. Is there, yes?
I did make a comment in the document, just about some
I took care of
repeated
that.
text. Okay, great.
Excellent. Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Any abstentions?
One.
One abstention. Minutes are approved. Thank you. Chris, are there any bills to review and sign?
No bills this evening.
All right. Then our next order of business is the project eligibility requests. But I do see that we have some folks in the room who might want to comment on one of our project funding application requests. We had opened this meeting, was advertised as having public comment. I don't know if you folks want to make any more comment on the District 5 schoolhouse application beyond what you already have. We'll wait and see, I guess, if any members of the public arrive who'd like to speak on it. So I guess we'll stick with, I was going to take it out of order. People were waiting. So we will stick to the project eligibility request. Was everyone able to find them in the drive? There are a couple of new ones. It's my opinion the first on the list is the First Congregational Church. Do we have an opinion from town council in regards to that yet?
So we don't yet, and I left some time to go in a little bit more detail if we so choose later in the agenda. I do anticipate having a formal opinion from town council this week. I think seems to be one of the last kind of questions that the committee had from their original review of the application. I understand that it's critical for moving forward, so the applicant did ask if they should be in attendance tonight. I think we're still waiting on that. I did include in the project eligibility folder, they've provided some of the other information that we looked at, namely the different times that the specific portions of the structure were created at which year, and some of the other kind of detailed project and activities that are take place within the facility. So, although we're still moving through that eligibility request, I think we still have to wait for the town council opinion to really move forward on this specific request. But I'm happy to move forward as the committee sees fit.
No, John,
I got one comment to add. In Skip Burnett's email to you, he listed all the things supposedly that, they do from the, let's call it the common good. One of the things that's not in it that I think is important is the church actually owns the town common. And basically anything that happens on that town common, in a sense, the church is letting us use their property. I think that's important.
it's a good point. They're a good neighbor to all. I think that since we have requested an opinion from town council, that we should take no further action on it until we get that request. Do you folks agree?
Yeah.
That's fine with me.
All right, so let's keep going. Yes.
Sorry. I have to bring up something. I do agree with you on that aspect, but if there's any aspect that we also need to, I think should have in parallel going on, is have an understanding, and looking at my historic commission representative, to look at from the perspective of the parts of the building that are now laid out saying this is the original part and this is the add-ons. What's the historic part? Should there be any project that is eligible?
I think in light of the fact that we have so many things on the agenda, I think we'd probably be more effective if we talk about everything that has to do with the First Congregational Church all at once we determine whether or not we can consider an application from them. I mean, it doesn't matter today. If we're told by town council we can't, it doesn't matter what's historic. I think that just to move through the agenda, let's stick to the ones we can take action on tonight. And if we have time and everybody wants to stay, circle back. Is that all right?
Yeah, just a fact-finding thing as a takeaway for someone else to look at that. We don't have to have evidence through here anyway.
Do you want to suggest that someone go look at it, or do you have that answer? I guess I'm
No, I don't have the answer.
No,
That's
the
what I'm
answer.
asking, that I'm recommending that our historic commission representative make a determination about how you would go about to see what aspect of any historic building in our community. How do you figure out what part is the historic aspect versus, you got a plaque on a building doesn't necessarily mean that the entire thing is historic, right? So just a general guidelines about how to approach said project.
Well, I agree with all that you've said, but I do think it is partly incumbent upon the applicant to provide as much information as possible so that we can determine that. Commission can supplement that, but we're not supposed to do the research for them. I mean, they're the applicant, so I'm happy to research as much as possible and come forward with whatever information, but they should be able to provide that to us as well, because that is an integral part of the process. And if I may, along with that, if I could, I did some, on the coalition website, there's a lot of information on using CPA funds for religious purposes and churches and stuff. So I compiled some information to try and make it a little bit easier for this committee to kind of broaden our view as to what other communities, how they've handled this situation. Until the judicial courts come down with their final findings after appeals and everything, we're really kind of winging it. And obviously, town council is going to have a big part of our say of what we do, but I think it's important to see how other communities have handled it throughout this process as well. So if I may, I'd like to pass along this, some information from the coalition. It's got several different communities that have used CPA funding for different parts of churches. Some were rejected, some weren't, so I included both. There's also a coalition explanation of how what their attitude is towards all this. And then there's also, from the website, there's an analysis and kind of a summary of the court action from an attorney. So it helps kind of put everything in perspective so that we can figure out, are we on the right track, or are we really far off? And if council comes back and says, yes, it's okay, except for this, this, and this, that we have some guidelines that other communities have researched and done and approved their projects. I'm not saying that they're correct in doing it, but at least we have some precedents set. So if you don't mind, I'd
That's wonderful, thank you.
Sure.
Do you know if those projects, I know the database is quite large.
Well,
Were
I
these
didn't-
projects after the Acton suit was filed, or?
Yes, some of them were before, some of them during, some of them
Thank
post.
you.
And when I didn't go through each community, they basically took what the coalition had compiled as far as, when I looked up, using, I think I Googled, searched in their search engine, was like using CPA money for church renovation or something, but then a lot of stuff started coming up, and I just went through that. And picked the ones that I thought were most appropriate. I'm sure there's probably more, but, and I thought the legal information, the back page, was really helpful to me, understanding the whole process of what that court action was about. And it wasn't as severe as I thought it was, actually. And there's a lot of leeway in the determination, so, like all legal things. Chris?
Yeah, I just, I appreciate the conversation. I will pass this on to the applicant. I think they'll be interested in that and in
Sure.
terms of making the case to the committee for the historicity of the structure. What I'd like to do is just, because we do have later on in the agenda a space for that discussion, I think we can have a broader discussion at that point if we so choose. Just in terms of takeaways from the discussion that I think I've heard, I just want to clarify from the committee. We're looking for the applicant, I can pass this along, and to perhaps approach the Historic Commission with some of that background on the building of why it's historic, whether they get a formal determination or to have at least some kind of conversation, perhaps a letter of support, to seek that for, not necessarily maybe the eligibility, but for the full application round. Am I hearing that as the takeaway?
So she said the onus is on the applicant to
Certainly.
do the
And-
legwork to find the information, whether or not it's historic. So that would be a terrific thing to ask them. They may well already have that information, so that would be very helpful.
Yeah, didn't we need that for the fire truck? The Historic Commission needed to say it was a historic artifact you were
Yes.
interested in.
Well, yes, but it's already been determined that, but,
Okay.
and the commission could certainly verify anything that they bring to us. That's not an issue. But I think it's upon them to say this is, if they have a certain area that they want to consider for renovation or restoration, then give us the facts as to why it's historic.
Understood.
Is that, do you agree with that, Jason, or no?
No, I wasn't saying about like why it's historic, it's what is deemed historic. Which part's been
Because it's a
already
structure
determined, yes.
that's been
Okay.
added on to over the
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
That makes sense.
Does it stop at the 1776? What has been determined, right? Is it the 1891 edition? Is it the 1834 edition? Right, that kind of thing.
Got it.
Understood.
But wouldn't that be the Historic Commission to say that? Given the background that the church would have to provide?
I think the church would need to provide their information, their records, and if the Historic Commission is in agreement with them, then it is historic in our eyes as well. All right. So let's move on to our second eligibility request. Remember, we're not going to dive into the merits of it. It's whether or not it is eligible for CPC funding. It is about a feasibility study for 11 Elizabeth Street. Kathy, would you like to speak to?
I would.
Thank you.
So, the Shrewsbury Housing Authority determined back in the spring that we own property at Elizabeth, off of Elizabeth Street. We have 36 units there. And it came to our attention that we had perhaps a little bit of land that we might be able to build on. So we, out of our reserve funds, hired Jarvis Land Survey to do a survey of the property. He came back and we have even more land than we initially thought. We have contacted J.M. Grenier Associates to do just an initial conceptual plan, and they seem to think that we might actually be able to put 10 duplexes on that space, which would be 20 affordable housing units. Our dream is that these would be for families. So what we're asking here is we have a conceptual plan, and I think everything was submitted, so some of these plans could be up on the screen if anyone would like to see them, but we did our initial survey, and then the conceptual plan, and the next step is to do a feasibility study, which is actually an engineering study to determine if we could in fact build these units. The cost of that is $7,000, so we have submitted a funding or an eligibility application seeking the $7,000 from this body. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Go for it.
Make- oh, Go.
The situation of the land is close to Jordan Pond. Is there any possibility that you would have to deal with wetlands permitting?
We don't know. That's the purpose of this project, is to do the feasibility study. They will answer all that questions. One of the questions that's asked is, what additional permit would be required? And this particular $7,000 study will determine that.
Okay.
Any
Yeah.
questions?
Is the $7,000 inclusive of all foreseeable fees at this point, or because I also see a hourly fee schedule? I was wondering if that was just calling out how much they reached up to 7,000 based on these fees, or there'll be additional fees at that rate?
We're expecting the fee to be $7,000, and that's just what we're asking for this. For the study that will let us know what our next steps are. There will be more fees, and there will be bigger projects coming down if we could do this, but this particular step is $7,000.
And then follow up?
Yes.
If they determine that it's not, they can't do 10, you can't do 10 built units, but maybe you can do 8. Is
We
this
would
gonna
do
be-
8 happily, yep. It's all about, and we think that these could be family units. We don't have a lot of family units in town, so that's a huge opportunity for us.
It's nice that it's near the school, too.
It is, they could walk to school.
Any other questions about what the feasibility study would include, or?
The quote, or the quote from J.M. Grenier is included for everyone to review, so the specifics of what he will do is in there, as well as the conceptual study and the initial survey from Jarvis.
And if we remember the table, that helps us determine if we can acquire, create, preserve, support, or rehabilitate and restore. This does fit with creating community housing, which is one of the few things we can create.
I was kind of happy to check that off.
There any other questions or discussion about it? Anyone? John?
In the feasibility study, they wouldn't draw up an estimated cost at this point to put the 10 buildings. Let's assume they say we can put 10 up. They wouldn't have any rough estimate of costing at this point, would they?
They may, yeah, because that's what we're hoping for him, just to have a plan that we can kind of take forward and, probably be coming back to this body multiple times. So that's what we're hoping for.
Okay.
And there'll be a lot of other departments involved in this going forward. I mean, if we could put 10 units there, it's gonna be on this body, beyond this body's capabilities, and it would be phases too. I mean, it wouldn't all happen at once.
All right.
Martha?
Just a follow-up on I'm in the document now and looking at the section 1.1, existing conditions review and site inspection. And it says they're going to look at USDA soil mapping. Do you know if they're going to do any test soils or test pits?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. Okay.
Well, for this purposes of this vote, is there a motion to either yes, it's eligible, or no, it's not?
I'd make a motion that it's eligible, if that's what you're looking for.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of determining this application as eligible to move forward in the process, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. This project, we will formally let the Housing Authority and the Affordable Housing Authority know that this project
Housing
is
Authority.
considered eligible. And at our next meeting, I know you've already created your funding application. If there's folks who'd like to, we will invite public comment if there's people with questions or comments. If anyone wants to join you to make a presentation, you can present. Thank you. Right, so next is Camp Wenigan parking additional funding. I'd like to speak to this one. This is an eligibility request saying that the original Camp Wenigan project it turns out that they are unable to do it as planned. They thought it would all be able to be done in-house. So this is looking to see if it's eligible to possibly have this project done by outside sources.
Yeah, so just, if I may, just kind of piggybacking on that. So the original project, as was approved and funded, had a portion of work that was anticipated in the budget that was provided to be done in-house. That portion of work is no longer able to be completed in-house, and so they're looking to acquire additional funding to bid out that work and have that funded rather than being done in-house. So that's the impetus for this request. The project as is not changing from the original. It's simply funding for that additional work.
So it is a project that we have previously determined to be eligible. Is there anything about the project that we would feel is no longer eligible? Well, next step is to discuss the merits of the request for funding, but is this eligible, does this project continue to be eligible? You have a thought.
As
I can
long as
tell.
we can, as long as we continue the conversation, because there's more questions. Yeah.
Any other questions about eligibility of this? John?
Can we go into this a little more detail as to what the project, I guess the larger scope, what is expected to be completed?
The
And what
original
portion-
project was,
It looks like we're only asking for $4,000.
there's
No, you-
two Camp Wenigan applications in the file.
On one of them then.
One of them, yeah.
There's
one's a
one
trail.
here. I've got another copy of this. What Chris has suggested is that the project that we approved last year and funded last year, part of their budget was to be completed with in-house, with assets and manpower already in town, but they're no longer able to do that. So what they're asking for is the same project, but they're going to request additional funding for the project. So the project was determined to be eligible. They're building a parking lot so that there's access to Camp Wenigan. That project was already determined to be eligible. This is just step one of basically they're coming back to us to ask for more money. But right now, is it eligible? We said it was once before. Would anybody like to make a motion that we still think it's eligible?
I move that this project continues to be eligible for
Thank
CPCC
you.
funding.
A second?
Second.
All in favor of that continues to be an eligible project, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Any abstentions? So this project does continue to be eligible, And we will later consider whether or not, if there's a presentation that would like to be made to help us understand why more funding is needed or how, we'd be delighted to hear that. And so then the $4,000 one that is before us is also, the next one is also regards to Camp One again. And this is project for, they are asking for funds related to a wheelchair accessible trail. Would you like to speak to it, Nadia?
Well, I can speak to this wearing my Trails hat. This was originally added on to, we had proposed that we would do this when we originally asked for the parking area, because the parking area will have a handicapped parking space, and it would not go anywhere if we didn't have this wheelchair accessible trail. So that is where that originated. It is a 680-foot trail. It goes to the old Girl Scout ruins in the park. It's not a large amount of money. It's a packed gravel path, and which apparently is state-of-the-art these days. Let's see, what else can I tell you about it? We have applied, the Trails Committee has applied to Mass Trails for a substantial amount of the money of this, and they will only pay 80%. So it's around $20,000 for it. And the application we sent to them would be 16 plus, and then we'd be asking CPC for the 20% that they want as a matching grant. So they don't want to take the full benefit, take the full responsibility of paying for this. They want us to come up with some extra money. So here we are. Are there any questions about that? Now, I'm not saying we're going to get this grant from Mass Trails, but we applied, and it's in, and we'll see what they say. But, we're taking a shot at it. Okay. John, you look like you,
Well, the only question I had is it's a chicken and egg type thing. Do we,
I know, it always is.
well,
We
would they,
can't-
if they're gonna give us 80%, do they wanna know that the other 20% is available before they commit the 80%?
They say no. They say as long as you have identified a reliable source.
Oh, okay.
Now, seeing as
Yes.
the parking area got a good whack of money from CPC last year, I consider that a reliable source. And, I've had a discussion with the people at Mass Trails, and, they seem to think that was, we didn't have to have the money in hand, we didn't even have to have an application in hand, as long as we identified the source. So I think we're good on that.
Yes.
When do you expect you might hear from Mass Trailers, or from,
Mass Trail? Technically, it's 200 days after the due date for the application, which would put it way at the end of August. But I think that they look at them ahead of time and, as they come to them, but they should have it by September. I'm hoping it's a lot sooner than that. I don't know what their workflow is like, whether they've got, dozens or hundreds or however many applications they've got, and, how much money they've got to give out. So, that's kind of a black box. But you make an application and you see how it goes. So,
You're asking if it's eligible, the project would be eligible to create a wheelchair accessible trail at Camp One again.
yes.
Do we agree that if the box checked is that creates recreation? If we agree, we can determine this project eligible.
That's,
Would anyone involved, not anyone would like to make a motion to that effect?
I don't want to make the motion because I'm too involved.
Ash,
I'll make the motion that this project is eligible.
a second?
Second.
Those in favor of determining this project is eligible, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? So we will also notify the Trails Committee that this project has been determined eligible, and we will later consider their full application for funding. Next is eligibility of Phase 2 of the historic gravestone restoration. anyone who wants to speak to this one? Co-sponsor form, there's lots of documentation from them in here. That's really, there we go. So this is an application to Phase 2. We had previously funded a study, and this would be the action based upon that study to preserve and restore historic gravestones in Mountain View Cemetery.
Now, as I recall, we were pretty much unanimous in approving eligibility last time, and we're only held up by not having a public meeting on the matter. And seeing as this is a public meeting, we have a public meeting.
The gravestones had not, they were pulled back before we had not determined eligibility of
Yes,
this
I
one
know, we had
before.
not, but there were, the sense of the committee seemed to be in favor, as I recall.
It's just eligibility right now. So are there
Right.
any other questions, comments, or discussion about the eligibility of this moving forward? And we care to make a motion that it is eligible?
I'd like to make a motion that this project is eligible for funding.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? This one is also determined as eligible. Chris, are there any other incomplete or pending eligibility requests?
No, just in keeping with our past process, I just keep those on there just for the board if there was any comment. I do not have any for those at this point.
Then we will move on to we have 2 project applications for funding before us. Our public has not grown at all since we started. Is there anything, you gave a wonderful presentation last time. It was very thorough and we appreciate it very much. Is there anything that you wish to add about the District 5 Schoolhouse Phase 2 project? You don't have to, but if you'd like to.
Thank you for the invitation for having me back again tonight. I just wanted to know if there were additional questions that you had of me. I am prepared to give the report again if that's needed. I did want to reiterate that we have also applied for additional funding for other phases of this project. We won't know about those until after town meeting, but we've been encouraged in that process, and we were invited to submit a full application and a full grant for that amount to help with the design phase, which would be the next phase that would follow up from the feasibility. And I know that earlier there were some questions about traffic, but with the society's ability to provide for police escorts at all times, that it would be open to the public as we have in the past, and the improvements done at that particular intersection, we feel that public safety has been taken into account also. So if there are any other questions that members might have, I'd be happy to answer them.
This is a request for $5,000 for the next phase of study to move forward. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, I guess after this this is another feasibility study. So the next phase would be an actual design,
Correct,
okay?
correct,
And then the next phase after that would be the build.
yes.
Do we have any rough estimates of those costs at all yet?
I would not have a sense of what an architect would determine as feasible, and that information would be what would drive the design study. So it's building upon the strategic steps from what the law requires, not only Massachusetts law, but the national law, and also the standards for historic preservation. So it does take some expertise to come up with that. Step by step, we hope to determine what would be the best route to take to make it accessible to the public.
Okay.
the amount that the additional grant that we've applied for is a significant amount of funding, so we feel that if funded, that portion of the design study would be very helpful in the next phases.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion, if there's no other comments. I move to recommend to town meeting CPA funding for the amount of $5,000 for the District Number 5 Schoolhouse Historic Restoration Accessibility Feasibility Study Phase 2.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstained? And thank you. We will be recommending to town meeting that this funding be approved.
Thank you. On behalf of the society, our sincere appreciation. We've been around since 1898, so we're starting year 126 of preserving history in Shrewsbury, so thank you for your support.
Thank you.
The next two,
Sure.
yes,
Question.
yes.
At what point will we be reviewing the actual language for each of the articles? Because last cycle, we had to do two things, not only recommend the project, but also the language on that.
I think
And
it
given
makes
our,
sense
given our,
to do that all at once before we send it to,
just asking the
yeah,
question.
so that would be, this is February.
Yeah.
March, or when will we send it, April or March?
We would probably set it for the March meeting, certainly by then. I think the mid-March is when Select Board typically signs the warrant. We can have placeholders in the meantime, but certainly we'll want it to be pretty set for that time, so.
I'd like the committee to all be able to see it, not just hear it before they vote on it.
Right.
I guess
Yes.
the selectmen signing the warrant, even what they put in the warrant is very generic. It's really mid to late April. When the finance committee does the review is when the wording becomes specific. That's, to me, that's the drop dead requirement to be specific is, and they usually will review it, say, the last 2 weeks of April. So,
Well, since we'll have others, we won't get through all of them since February, perhaps by the April meeting, we will have them all completed, but we can go with what we've already voted on at least next time. All right. The library story walks. We have, application is in the drive. Seems to be anyone to speak to it.
So I can speak to it. So I apologize if there was a miscommunication with the library for them to present tonight. But the application is in, part of the library story walks is looking to install storybook features. They've included in the application a number of design elements, kind of, you can see what some of the examples of other communities have used in terms of the story walk. It allows the kind of librarians to attach laminated storybook features within the park, typically installed on stakes. They do include a budget for installation of $7,250 for the project to be installed. And so what this would do is it would provide an amenity in the community space that would allow, through passive recreation, but you can also engage with books that are selected by local librarians to be showcased. They'll be changed from time to time to create a kind of a feature that you can return to and have an additional kind of storybook experience. They're typically geared towards children to kind of draw them into the space and to have that kind of interactive use of the park space. So it's a great way to kind of enhance through both an amenity and a feature, but also that creates a little bit of kind of organic programming of the space as well, and activity in an informal way. So showcasing some of the talents of our great library staff. So.
Is there a signed co-sponsor form on file somewhere? There is not one in this drive.
Yeah, I know we did receive one, so I apologize if it was not
Does
uploaded.
exist. That's great. So, questions, comments? Chris can try to answer any questions.
I'm a little confused about the amount. I see $7,250 for installation of 20 pedestals, and then I see another quote for about $6,000 for the pedestals themselves.
Right.
So what amount is being requested?
The application is not actually completed,
Right. At least I couldn't find it.
so
Or the one on,
that might be why we have questions.
It's a narrative.
one uploaded anyway.
Or does there exist a completed application and we just have the wrong one in the full file?
Yeah, I just want to double check if that was.
Sorry, I didn't notice that earlier.
Is there an amount? Yeah. It's not, yeah, I couldn't find an amount. Yeah, that's the other one. Yeah, I'm assuming that that's what it is.
Yeah, so I apologize, I may have missed, there were some technical difficulties with the editable PDF, so a lot of the responses may not have been included in that, in the file that was uploaded. It formatted incorrectly, so, I apologize for not catching that.
If the completed information isn't available for everyone to look at before deciding, we probably should put this one off to the next one. There is an editable application, because I'm not finding any of that either, the signed co-sponsor form or a complete application.
Right.
But if the folks from the library could get those, or if they're submitted and they're just somewhere lost, let's find those and distribute them well in advance as soon as they're available to the committee so that we can look at those and put that on our next month's agenda. I don't want to decide without that in front of us. If you all agree.
Agreed.
Agreed.
So we have approved the District 5 schoolhouse funding. At our next meeting, we will consider, and we already have some of this information in the drive, we will make a determination on and invite public comment on the additional funding for the Camp Wanigan parking lot, the Camp Wanigan wheelchair access trail, the Elizabeth Street feasibility study, and Phase 2 of the historic gravestone restoration. We'll invite public comment on that. Hopefully there'll be discussion, some thoughts, and we'll make a determination on whether or not to recommend those to town meeting at our next meeting. So then, we can move on to discussion items, Chris. Your name is next to many of those.
Can I
Yes, John?
Go back to the posts. I had a couple questions here. The quote for the aluminum mounted posts has expired. the quote was only good until the 1st of January, or the 13th of January.
Let's add that to our list of things to ask the library to please provide for our consideration.
Yeah. So I guess, was this just an estimated quote? Are these gonna have to go out to bid once we approve it, or are we gonna use this particular, the barking dog, I guess, company? Oh, you don't know?
I'll check
You
back.
don't know?
I'll check back when they update the quote if it meets thresholds for that.
You know, the same thing with the landscaping too, does that automatically go to Leon, or are we gonna put that out for bid? I mean, the reason I ask is we got 20 poles to put in the ground, and they're gonna charge us like $360 per pole, which sounds high.
Can ask them for clarification on that next time.
How's your back? You want to go dig 20 holes?
They have post hole diggers, yeah, you want, I can go rent them at Home Depot.
Well, in any project that town department is doing, they'll have to follow any and all applicable rules and regulations about bid, and I believe it's above a certain amount. So all of that will be
Well, yeah,
followed.
that was kind of my question. I mean, does this come I'll make up a number. If it's under 15 grand, you don't have to put it out the bid. It's not,
What
what
is
is some
that?
state law
So
on
the,
that?
the threshold is typically, if it's under $10,000, it doesn't require 3 quotes. It's always good practice, and I know that generally our office at least always does look for those 3 quotes regardless. So I can certainly, that may have been done and they've provided the selected quote. I'm not sure, but I'll follow up and see what was done. But, and I don't know if that's cumulative or separate, so I can coordinate with the procurement officer as well to make sure that it's all.
Now, I don't recall if it was in the documentation, but I think they have to pour concrete with these too, right?
Mhm. I assume they
I
would.
believe so.
Yeah, so, that's a little complication. That's not like just digging a hole.
Well, the library will get us more information, and maybe they'll be able to join us next month.
I
Yes.
have a quick question, too. I guess I'm a little confused on this one as well. Are we going to be considering the, $13,000, almost $14,000?
I think the library
Expenditure
has to
together?
tell us what's been
Okay.
submitted or what's available to us is not clear. So,
Can I speak
I mean,
as-
they two separate
Can I
things?
speak as the co-sponsor to that? So, the town would be purchasing the post, we would be purchasing the equipment, that's the 6,200. The installation would be separate, and the installation also includes prevailing wage, which we have to pay because it falls under construction category, and then concrete in however they're gonna drill the holes. They're either gonna drill them with a hand machine or a bobcat with a post hole digger on it. So that's what Priya is looking for, is those two numbers combined.
and a complete application will have a project budget in it, not just the quotes for us to guess. So they'll give us a complete application, I'm sure.
Okay, Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, until it's complete, we'll wait.
got it.
Yeah. And I apologize, I believe that was submitted, but the formatting of the document.
Right, she did it on a separate, it's on a separate sheet because everything came out in one long sentence on the application. It would not,
That must have been frustrating.
so.
Yeah.
As a person who has things like that happen all the time.
Well, we've got time.
I apologize.
We'll
the-
Right.
that-
get all that information in front of us, and then we'll make a determination. So yes.
I would just like to comment in defense of this project, having submitted my own form. This is a really hard, complicated process, and it took me longer to find my form than it did to complete my form. It's not on the website. There is not a form that you can fill out and type in on the website. There's typos in it. It's a very arduous process, and I was thoroughly disappointed. I think it explains why we get things in the format that we do. And the fact that this was submitted to you, probably complete, but you only have some of it, is because of the way we make this available to people. So in your defense, I'm sure it was done properly, and our formatting is awful.
But as soon as you let me know, because you were actually the first person, I guess folks Don't suffer in silence. That's the PSA for tonight.
And
Don't suffer in silence if there's a problem. People can't fix
So,
it till they know.
I was on the ballot committee, I've been on this committee since its inception, and I had difficulty finding what I needed to do to complete. And it shouldn't
No,
be
I had
that
to
hard.
send it to
I
you.
knew what I was looking for and couldn't find it.
Yeah, I had the same problem. I looked through the town website, and then I remembered seeing it in our shared drive. And that's where I got.
The
That's
one in
where we
our
find it.
shared
It's not on
drive
the
is
website.
fillable, but it is actually an older, the
I know
questions
there's
are the
a-
same, but there's some deadlines that are printed on it
Yes,
that
what's-
are
yeah.
old.
What's in the website is the full
Plan.
9-page.
Right, and that is
plan,
not,
Which you have
appropriate
to
to
actually
be.
put a text box, which is why it was not wrapping, because it's not a fillable, a form you can fill out. You can do the budget form, you can do the eligibility form, but you can't do the application. And here we go, I'm already here. I called the planning office to say, can someone help me? Because I've allocated Tuesday afternoon to complete this form. I called, and the response was, gee, who would know the answer to that? I said, is Chris in? He would. No, he's not here. Email planning@shrewsbury.gov. So this is the response we're giving to the public when they try to complete these forms, and that's just not acceptable.
you're correct.
I had to actually.
I'd like to talk offline
convert
about that.
form over to a different format in order to fill it in.
Yes, and I didn't have Adobe, so I couldn't do that. And I didn't think I should have to buy Adobe to complete a form
No,
that should be
you
on the
definitely should
website.
not.
Sounds like a job.
So
of the
we'll move
IT
that higher, now that you've got some help, Chris.
But I emailed your, again, I don't want to throw people under the bus, but since we're here, I emailed your office. So I had allocated Tuesday, you helped
they
me
didn't
find the
help.
form. I emailed on Wednesday. That was now 12 days ago, and it's still not there. So, like, how can we make this more difficult for people? And there's a typo too on page 27 of our planning thing, because I had to read that, so.
It needs to be on the website, the packet as one document, and then each form as a fillable PDF, separate. So that way no one feels that they have to submit to us 26 pages, that's
Not
some of our
relevant.
own words back. We just want the application from them. So- But you have an assistant planner now. It will get done forthwith.
Do assistant plan.
I hope so, because I've still got to fill out the complete form for the wheelchair trail. I'm not looking forward to it.
We'll work to get those documents a little bit
All right.
easier to find and to fill out. I hear what's being discussed tonight, so.
Excellent. We will get that fixed. Come hell or high water. So, next on the agenda, the new member training materials draft update. I know that Jason was able to get access to, or actually even the coalition has issues with the links on their website. Jason was able to point out to the coalition that there was not a usable link to the library of videos, which they are also in the process of correcting. But I believe that was added to the new member information for anyone that wants to learn more. There are some videos about the Community Preservation Act, Community Preservation Commission, and more tools for us.
I don't know if this is the page you're talking about, but there was one page that when I opened it, all it had was links on it, but then I couldn't open any of the links.
Right.
Is that in the folder that, that Chris created?
Yep.
Okay. So the links were probably not hyperlinked. They're just, if
I
you
don't-
cut and paste,
I
you should
expect
be able to click on
it,
them.
and
And
it
Chris is
doesn't.
adding that to his
Well,
list.
you can tell
but-
right away when I go to click on it with the arrow doesn't turn into,
In the meantime,
Doesn't
you
turn
can
into
cut
an
and
arrow.
Right
paste
there.
it
Yeah,
into your
that, it's
browser.
working for me.
Is it?
it wasn't
Yeah.
working for me on my home computer.
Okay.
It's possible the links are broken or weren't active to begin with, but either they can. That should be a simple fix. And I think at this time there aren't, that's the only update to that folder.
Yeah.
Am I correct, Chris?
Mine wouldn't open up.
And if you have a particular idea, especially those of us that are newer to this, of something that would be helpful to be in there, let me know, or let Chris know,
Yeah.
and we'll try to get more resources in there. It is a work in progress.
Yeah. I mean, I tried it last Friday when it was opened, and when you sent it, and it didn't work, and I tried it again today, and I thought maybe after a few days it might work, but it still didn't work today.
The email that Chris sent out to us with information about the Affordable Housing Trust?
No, we sent, the
Didn't open
email he
that.
sent out Friday basically said, here's all the material for the meeting.
Ah,
So in going through, opening all the other stuff we just discussed, as well as that one that had the links in it, I couldn't open it Friday, and I went back again today, figuring now today's Monday, and, maybe something got updated and it still didn't work.
that works. The link works for me.
I'm gonna add the word
Yes, our
ours.
committee officially needs technical assistance. Yes, that link is working for me, but I also have the folder open on my laptop. All right, we will keep checking and double checking and figure out how to make that work going forward. Next, under there's draft signage guidelines update, and the update is there really is nothing new.
Yeah, so we haven't had any updates for that.
Hey,
But we'll keep that on the agenda as we move
Okay.
forward.
well, and hopefully when we soon have piles of dirt and projects in progress. Right now, we don't have anything to put the sign next to, so it's all right. The next was the discussion about the anti-aid amendment, the legal opinion.
Yeah, so I did provide a memo out to town council specifically related to this. And again, as I mentioned, I anticipate that this week to have that response back to our office, which I'll forward to the committee. In the memo I did, in terms of crafting that memo to give town council enough of a background, I did do some of my own kind of evaluation, dive into the topic. And I think, at least in preliminary discussions with town council, I think, really looking at, the three-part test, I think is going to be a key portion of that. So that's something that came out of the Acton case, which is a three-part test for evaluating if a project is under the anti-aid amendment and the purview of that. The courts, in making that three-part test, admit of their own accord that it is somewhat subjective and vague, so it does leave some leeway in applying a three-way test or three-part test from that. But again, so that's part of what I'm asking town council to opine on in terms of the specific case law, not just of Acton, but what we've seen in other communities in terms of giving us a roadmap, certainly to avoid any pitfalls that have been identified through that case law and give us some precedent to work with. Ultimately, I think, and again, we'll rely on town council's opinion, but ultimately, I think it really goes back to each community is going to have to decide what level of liability that they're comfortable with, and I think that's a discussion that we'll have to have moving forward. I think, again, council's opinion is going to give us a good roadmap in terms of that. But for each project, we're probably going to have any project that falls within this realm will likely to have this type of conversation of, specifically that three-part test and what kind of comfort do we have in that realm. As I'm sure the committee's aware, the coalition website, as well as many newspaper publications, show that there's a wealth of communities that have funded projects very similar to what we're seeing being applied for. So there is precedent in that way. But again, as was mentioned, does not necessarily mean that it's completely watertight. And so we do want to be cautious moving forward. And I think we're taking the right steps to at least have that roadmap and to limit our liability, if not completely eliminate it. So I've been around long enough to know that you probably can't ever completely eliminate it in terms of legal liability, but certainly limit it to the
Lawyers have to
extent
make a living.
Well, we will look forward to hearing an update on that. If you do hear this week, if you could shoot us an email at least with an overview, or if there's a memo in response, share that with us sooner than later. That would be terrific. Then also, Chris, project and budget updates.
Did you?
No, it's okay.
So I apologize. I was meant to have project updates for this evening, and I was not able to get those. So I will have a more formal update for those projects at the next meeting. I know that many of them are well in hand, and so we'll work to have a specific progress update from each one of where they are and any deliverables that have been completed to date. I will touch on the budget update. Let me just pull up. And if I will, that kind of ties into the draft annual report, if I can kind of combine those two topics.
Absolutely.
What are we at, 6? So I do have the draft of the annual report for the Community Preservation Committee. I believe this is actually the first one that we'll be submitting. So what that does, I took an example of some of the other committees in the community, some of the topics that they touch on, and crafted a report that I think really encapsulates a lot of what the committee does. I pulled a lot of the language from our application at the previous town meeting that kind of gives the overview of the committee's roles and responsibilities. So some of that language may be familiar, as well as the guiding principles and priorities, and outlines the goals that we have active as of now that were most recently updated. I then touch on each of the articles that were approved at town meeting, and give, it's very similar to the kind of warrant sheet that we used for the town meeting memo, a little bit more streamlined. Obviously, for the more detail, if members of the committee wanted to, they can go back to those records.
There will be a few edits to it, like the spelling of my name.
Oh dear, I didn't notice that.
Apologies.
That's all right. You can blame my mother. And actually, I technically Deborah Page Mooney.
Okay.
If everyone else can take a chance, not necessarily tonight, but look through, make sure your name is spelled correctly. If you see anything that's off.
I'll have to look back where
What's that?
I'll have to look back where I pulled that. That must be, I hope it's not on the website too. Okay.
I think it's correct there.
Yeah, I think if you can get John's last name right, you should be able to get everyone's last.
I was gonna say.
Sometimes with my name, they concentrate a little more, that's all.
So in that, we do have the draft budget. So that details the total of all of those funds for each of those projects. So our first round, first and second round, including the fire truck allocation, we were able to successfully allocate $1,290,000 to projects that are currently underway. It's 10 projects allocated across those. So I think that's a great success for the first and second round of our kind of eligibility and funding application rounds. And really excited for the projects that are coming out of that. I did note that the FY23 net surcharge was 800. Actually, I believe that's supposed to be the 24 net surcharge. Was the 845,972. So I'll go back and just double check that language because that was the 24, and make sure that that's represented appropriately. So if that is the correct number, what our second year net budget will be is $1,536,200. So that obviously doesn't account for specifically the 10% going into each category. I can provide a more broken out version of that. We typically do that for the Maytown meeting anyways, so it's a little early, but I think we can pull it together and provide that to the committee as part of that memo. And so we'll have that broken out and the actual distributions for each account. It does show from each year all of those accounts and what's being charged to each account. So it's a very clear and straightforward document of what's been allocated and what's available in each specific account, including the so each of the three subcategories and the general, the reserve funds.
Questions?
Can I just have one comment? On the second page of the document, just in the second paragraph, it starts with, in order to assess. The last sentence says, the CPC is also required to hold at least one public hearing annually to gain input from the general public. What about, because we want to get our name out and stuff, not that everybody reads the annual report, what if we just either underline that or actually put that in bold? This way, if somebody happens to be perusing through and it jumps off the page at them, it'll start to give people more understanding that they should show up at a meeting once a year. That's all.
At the last 2 Aprils, we've also held a special meeting to do just
Right,
that,
yes.
without other business, but a brief overview. Jason doing CPC 101 and soliciting feedback. The first year we had a tremendous response, not as much the second. And that is something that we need to schedule, because typically it's April and apparently it's already February, so that will be here before we know it.
So are you definitely anticipating then a public meeting in April?
I think we need to,
Yes, I think we need to.
yes.
Okay.
Supposed to.
Should we also include the sentence that talks, maybe I missed it, but, you know, the sentence that includes we hold a workshop for everybody once a year in here somewhere? And bold that one also. Just so
The big
people,
workshop, was it August or September?
I thought it was August last year, I can't remember,
I think it was August.
so.
Maybe it's September. Whatever the date was, my daughter's dorm flooded and I had to run out in the middle of the meeting.
So,
All right, what else have you got for us, Chris? Anything else with that?
I believe that's it for those two items.
And then also on the agenda is Affordable Housing Trust Coordination. That is a link that, I believe that's what you're talking about, that we could not open. In the drive, it goes to a put new files here.
Yeah.
There's nothing there.
Yeah, so I was hoping to have a memo prepared for that. So this is part of the Affordable Housing Trust and their kind of work towards the possibility of a joint meeting. I do anticipate putting, you know, a potential application from them, looking for a potential for annual allocation of funds to their account. So that's born out of their, they've recently completed their action plan, which has, you know, funding sources. CPC is identified as a potential funding source for them. Just giving some background on kind of logistics is that any funding that is submitted to the Affordable Housing Trust is still beholden to all of the kind of legal ties of CPC. So even if it's held in a trust account, it would be a separate account allocated differently. And what I would encourage is we could look at, certainly with our funding agreements, in that process. So typically, as the committee's aware, after a project's awarded and after town meeting votes to allocate the funds, we then have a funding agreement that's prepared and signed by the awardees prior to the funding going and actually being dispersed. And that really details specifically what the expectations are. We've been fairly generic up till now, but I think that's an opportunity there where we could really work with the Affordable Housing Trust to craft an agreement that really specifies how that funding gets reviewed for specific projects. I think the benefit of allocating funds to the trust is that, number one, we have to allocate a portion to affordable housing anyways, so there's joint or mutual kind of goals in that way. And then the other is that to have it allocated to the Affordable Housing Trust gives them the agility in order to, as opportunities arise, to fund things more quickly than having to then go to town meeting to actually have that funding reallocated. So this would essentially allocate it. They would still, we could have in the funding agreement that they would still, with the specific project, bring that to the committee. We could still then, for each specific project that they're looking to utilize that funding, go through the eligibility request, the funding application request, similar to how all of the other projects go about that process. It would simply, for lack of a better way of saying it, would preload the town meeting vote, because that money would be allocated for those purposes. So.
Let me just be clear about this. We're going to send money to them without them having a project in mind at that point.
Correct, but it would be controlled by a funding agreement that would detail how that funding gets allocated. And regardless of what's said in that funding agreement, they're still beholden to the CPC funding requirements, and so.
And that hasn't been determined yet. That's what the Affordable Housing Trust is proposing, but that's for this body to decide whether or not that would happen. Is there precedence of that in other communities?
Yeah, there's a number of communities that do, different allocations. I can try to get a more detailed of, which communities do their full 10%. If they do more or less, I can try to get a better kind of idea of what specific communities do. But I do know that other communities do annual allocations to their trust as a funding mechanism.
Kathy?
I'm going to say, Melanie, I'm opposed to this for exactly the reason you outlined, is because they don't have a project in mind at all. This came up last year. I spoke against it last year, and I'm going to do it again, and I will probably do it forever. For as long as I sit in this seat, I will do it. But that wasn't why I raised my hand initially. I know builders in town have been paying into Affordable Trust for years. How much money is in their bank account now?
They have just under $1 million.
Have they done anything with that money ever?
They funded the action plan, which outlines what they're going to be doing with that.
Okay.
They've also-
They have $1 million. All they've done is hire a consultant to do a plan. I don't think we should give them any more.
They've also contributed to the housing production plan over the number of years, funding that process as well. So.
Okay. Everyone knows where I stand.
When they come to us with a proposal, we'll consider a proposal when it comes. But it's my understanding, so essentially what they're asking is that the money that we would normally, or a sum of money perhaps, that which we by statute reserve for affordable housing annually, that rather than reserving it and holding it, that we would give it to them, so that they, in theory, they could spend it faster rather than going through our process. But you're suggesting that we could have right of refusal, if you would, on the projects that they might use it for? Is that what you're suggesting?
Right. So, and I just want to be clear, I can't speak for the trust, but just kind of trying to give a snapshot of the discussions that have been had and what I anticipate in terms of a potential application. So, right, so the request would be that the funding would be allocated to the trust. It would be held in a separate account, which is, that's just required by law that it has to be separately held, similar to how CPC holds the funds. But what it would do is that if they had a specific project, according to that funding agreement, any other restrictions that we do, they would have to follow. But what I'd recommend at a minimum is that they would present to CPC, go through the process of an eligibility application and a funding application, that same process that everyone goes to. The benefits of it being that if they had a project that was time sensitive, say it was, we had 3 months to act on this, of whether it's acquiring a property or whatever it is, oftentimes things in real estate do move quickly, and having to wait until annual town meeting can be a detriment to that process if someone's not willing to wait that amount of time to move on a project. So what that does is it just allows that ability for those funds to be somewhat more flexible, having been allocated to the trust. And the amount, I think, is something that's that would be discussed at a joint meeting, that we could dial in what, some contribution that CBC is comfortable with allocating, that the trust can utilize, so.
Okay, is their action plan publicly available? Or can we get our hands on it to read their action plan?
It should be. We actually just got the finalized version. It should be on their webpage. If it's not, I'll have it uploaded tomorrow morning. But I know we did just recently get it, so.
Yeah, if you could share that with the members of the committee once you find it, that would be terrific. Gail?
Am I understanding correctly in my head that if we allocate money into the trust, that would be taking money away from the housing, the CPA money that this project that's coming forward would have, yet the trust wouldn't have any obligation to partner with them? Does that make sense to me? Am I understanding that?
I think what Chris said, it would depend on if this body decided to allocate those funds, that there would be a funding agreement, and that would be something, I think that would be in it. But once the funds are expended or encumbered, they're expended or encumbered, and they're not. We have a lot of great historic preservation projects. Sometime we might have too many that we've been able to say yes a lot, but it would be, if money was reserved by them, unless we say under obligation to work. I don't know what the relationship is between the two entities and how we work together, but those are all really good questions that I think should be part of a greater discussion. John?
I guess, maybe being new, I'm still a little confused. In terms of the 10% talks about in the document, community housing, is that the same as affordable housing?
Yes.
Okay, so we can only give the 10% to affordable housing.
We, by law, have
that-
to reserve part of our annual budget, 10% for affordable or community housing, 10% for historic preservations, 10% for conservation and recreation.
I know all that. But again, I was getting caught up in the wording of, we have a housing authority, we have affordable housing, and then I saw community housing, so are all those different, I guess was my question.
Community housing is affordable housing, but it's a term that's being used more frequently.
Well,
May I?
Well, a lot of our phrases and terms evolve, and I think, Kathy, it's accurate to say it's a natural evolution of people were talking more about community housing rather than affordable.
I think attainable housing is a word, actually, that's a new word, attainable housing. But I will tell you, Housing Authority runs independently of the town. So the people who work for the Housing Authority are not town employees. We run independently. We are funded here in Shrewsbury. We have federal buildings, which is the towers on North Quincy, so that's funded by HUD. And then we have state facilities, which are Elizabeth, Francis Gardens, as well as we have several independent, so that's DHCD that funds that. So we have nothing to do with the town of Shrewsbury. We have been trying for 2 years to do a joint meeting with Affordable Housing Trust to try to do something together, and they don't show up. So again, I am opposed to taking this money, and what they say often is, we can't move fast enough because we don't have enough money. They have $1 million. So there are things that they could do, and they're not doing them, so why would we give them more? I don't see the reason for it. I guess we don't have an application, so we don't need to debate this point, but I felt very strongly about it this year. Clearly, I feel very strongly about it again.
Well, is there a plan to get us all in the same room at some point?
They don't
There's
show
been
up.
discussion about that for quite
Who's
some time.
affordable housing?
Yeah, who are these
There's a committee, and we've had meetings, and we've come. Jason and I were at the meeting, and they didn't show up. So I don't know what to do. They came to a housing.
Was that last year?
Yes, we attended that. We had the Housing Authority, Director of the Housing Authority was here, who is not a town employee. She's under no obligation to come to a meeting here, but she came because she wants to build more housing. And Affordable Housing Trust at the last minute canceled. And it's happened more than once. So I would love to work with them. I'm angry because we can't, but it's been 2 years we've been trying to, and we can't.
Is that
I
a
mean,
town committee?
So again, I don't want to speak for the trust, but I mean, they've just recently reformed and have been going through the process of developing their action plan to decide how they can use the funding. They've been in place for a considerable amount of time, but simply the activity levels of the trust have not been there. Part of that is a lack of funding mechanisms. There's not, other than fee and lieu, there's very little in terms of what funding can go into the trust. Not what could, but they just don't receive a lot of funds other than the fee and lieu account. So I think there's new energy in it now, and I think I'm hoping that those historical issues may be able to be put to the side and we can move forward, because I know there is an eagerness for them to really move forward and actually take action, which has not been done in the past. So
Is that a town committee?
it's a trust, so it's authorized by the selectmen, and it is, yes, public trust.
No, can I just add a comment? I happen to know people in Northborough who have a situation with the, they have built a few units of affordable housing, and the way that worked out is that a couple of interested parties formed a nonprofit to do just that. There are a couple of guys who are very good at various aspects of it. One guy's a lawyer, one guy's a realtor, and so on. And they actively look for things, and then they present them, and they've gotten a few units actually, purchased and built and done. But it took that special organization to get things going. I'm wondering if, maybe that's somewhere in there, there's got to be an interface between a committee and somebody who actually goes out and looks for things, and I don't know what's in their action plan. That's what I'd like to see, is how they're actually going about searching for projects.
Yeah, so that was just recently approved. I'm happy to share it. I'll also note in that, so they do have a draft budget in there. I believe the consultant put a 30% allocation from CPC to the trust, which they have already opined is too high in their opinion, so don't be turned away by that amount. That it's a draft budget, and that's their simply trying to formulate get an idea of what could be feasible, and that was what was presented from the consultant as a possibility. So, but the trust doesn't see that as, they would be looking for a smaller amount than 30%.
We'll look forward to reading that.
Well, for the committee, public information, if you go to the town website, there is a presentation that was done on September 26th of 2023 to the select board, so that might help anybody that doesn't understand what the agency is. I'm going to go look at it.
Thank you. Yeah, there's lots of information out there. We appreciate your helping us synthesize it or find the parts that we need to read. So there is no further action on that to be taken tonight. Are there any other items that we missed that we didn't get into enough, or, yes, Carl?
From our cemetery and parks meeting, we're finding co-sponsors are being overwhelmed by being project managers on these projects. And I'm wondering if somehow on the co-sponsor sheet, we need to add something that says whether they need to fund a project manager for their projects. And for additional background, Kevin, would you like to speak at all on this?
His name is on everything.
No? It's okay.
Is this something we can use our administrative budget of 5% for?
No,
No?
No,
no.
no. It would have to be the project cost, added to the project cost.
Ah,
Yeah, I just think of something on like the co-sponsor sheet that says, can you handle this in-house, or do you need to fund an external project manager for this?
Or would it make sense for a co-sponsor to decline a town department if it's not within their bandwidth at that time, or to, I wonder if that's a discussion or an agreement between the two parties, the town department and whomever's bringing it to them. Or maybe there's some education to be done with the general public with great ideas and great energy that the town department managers don't work specifically for them and only them.
Yeah, because if you
Would
look
that
at,
be accurate?
yeah, if you look at what's approved, there's a number that are
Yeah.
like
I just
Prospect
wonder
Park or
if that,
cemetery and.
I mean, perhaps there's a way we can share that message, but I also think that the co-sponsor needs to have a conversation before they sign off and say, sure, we'll do that with you. Let's make sure that both parties understand what they're both agreeing to. I know this is all still very new to people, and certainly there's kinks in the system, but I'm not sure what, we can certainly, when people talk to us, ask them to have conversations and to be honest and understanding. Kevin?
So I think where some of this came about is that anyone doing a project on town land has to have a town department co-sponsor. I'm not sure what the line is between co-sponsoring and actually being a project manager. Certain things we can do and certain things we can't. You know, and I'll use the story walk as an example. I will be the project manager on that because basically all I have to do is walk around with a tape and measure where each one goes, put a spot for the contractor, there it goes. And then go back and look at it and make sure he's doing it right. And so that's a simple one. Some of them are a little more complex than that. So
How can we be helpful to you so that, great things can happen,
that's a good question.
but without you being overburdened?
Yeah, I don't have that answer.
Okay, maybe we all can think about that one a little bit. Because certainly if it's on town land, if it's on park land, it is your purview. But you shouldn't have to dig every hole. But you need to be aware of, and we'll have to figure out how to make that manageable.
But I mean, probably there's a discussion to be had offline, but I don't hear what the issue is specifically. So I would love to comment, but not hearing the specific issue. We're required, we want to have the co-sponsorship. And we don't want to discourage applicants from applying thinking, well, X department has no bandwidth to do it, so therefore the great CPA has got money to offer, but if a department is not available, then we'll never get the project done. So what was that all about? What was the point of getting the money?
Well,
You know?
we can't create bandwidth within our town departments that doesn't exist.
That's
But
what
maybe
the
that's
problem
part
is.
of a discussion before signing off on co-sponsorship, what is needed. If the town department just simply has to give permission, or if you're able to discuss with people their budgets that, we can't project manage this for you, you'll need to add it to your budget, as Carl said. And we could certainly help facilitate those conversations to start. definitely we can think more about that.
So it sounds more like an expansion of that co-sponsorship agreement to say, what are we willing to do in this particular project?
And perhaps prefacing it with, man, we need to perhaps manage the expectations of an applicant. And perhaps if we know that a department does not have the bandwidth to be a part of a project, perhaps that's part of our discussion when we decide whether or not to approve it, whether or not it's feasible to happen in the timeline that the original applicant's hoping for. But that's information we won't know unless the town departments share that with us. Or,
If I use a playground project for an example, we can co-sponsor it, but we would have to write into the project itself that most likely the designer would be the project manager. They would be the ones that are overseeing it rather than us. So some of those projects are going to work out that way. And then again, like I said, some of them are simple and it's not real time consuming. So I think it's something we need to figure out on the inside, I guess.
Maybe we need more language on the co-sponsor sheet to spell some of that stuff out,
I was
to
going to
take into
suggest,
consideration. Yeah.
yeah, or even something as formal as a memorandum of understanding.
Yeah.
I think when we, at the end of this year, look at improving our application process, that's a good thought of what we do with that piece of it. And keep talking to us, please, Kevin, about how we can improve that process for the execution side. Give us a little time, we'll get it down. All right. Is there anything else, folks? Thank you for all of your time. At our next meeting, we will discuss funding requests for the Elizabeth Street feasibility study, the Camp Wanigan parking additional funding, Camp Wanigan wheelchair access trail, Phase 2 of the historic gravestone restoration, and hopefully the completed application for the library story walk will also be before us. So we will invite public comment at that time as well, if there is any. We'll make some decisions and spend some money. Yes.
I won't be here. I'll be out of town, but I will have someone else from the Housing Authority here.
Terrific,
Any questions
thank you.
about
If there are no other items, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. And that concludes our meeting tonight. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.